Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio a tutte e tutti. Io sono Mattia Ceracchi, sono responsabile dell'ufficio di Bruxelles dell'APRE, Agenzia per la promozione della ricerca europea, e questo è un evento che APRE organizza per presentare il rapporto europeo di valutazione intermedia di Horizon Europe, ospitando il presidente del gruppo di esperti che l'ha redatto, il professor Manuel Heitor. Benvenute e benvenuti a voi, Soci APRE, ma anche a tutti quelli che ci seguono con la diretta online. Io do subito la parola per iniziare, presentando Maria Cristina Pedicchio, presidente di APRE. Cristina, a te.
Grazie e un buongiorno a tutti i partecipanti numerosi. Grazie al nostro ospite Manuel Heitor che si collegherà tra poco, causa un impegno fino a fra 10 minuti dovrebbe collegarsi. Noi intanto facciamo dei brevi commenti sulla situazione. Come ha detto Mattia e come sapete tutti voi che vi siete collegati, questo è un report molto importante, il gruppo di esperti che è guidato da Heitor, con dentro parecchie persone, molti ex ministri, tra l'altro c'è la nostra Maria Chiara Carrozza, ex ministro italiano e presidente del CNR. L'incarico che avevano per questo report, il report ha come titolo Align, Act, Accelerate Technology Innovation to Boost European Competitiveness. Quindi vediamo già delle parole chiave molto importanti. La Commissione Europea aveva chiesto sia di fare una valutazione delle osservazioni sulla situazione di Horizon Europe, siamo a mid-term, ma soprattutto era stato chiesto agli esperti di fornire delle raccomandazioni strategiche, quindi strategia, soprattutto sul tema di come massimizzare l'impatto di ricerca e sviluppo. Quindi come facciamo a massimizzare l'impatto? Non so se sentite anche voi i miei bip, scusate se ci sono interferenze esterne, adesso le chiuderemo e scusatemi. Quindi questo report si aggiunge dopo i precedenti di Letta e di Draghi. Come sapete sono stati fatti questi due studi molto interessanti. Ne abbiamo parlato nella conferenza di APRE settimana scorsa, del 15 al 18, avevamo più di 200 partecipanti e si discusse in 4 giorni le varie cose, soprattutto di questi report, ma che prospettive ci saranno per il prossimo programma quadro. Si chiamerà programma quadro? Non sappiamo. Come sarà fatto? Non sappiamo. Quello che emerge dagli studi e che oggi Heitor comunque ci chiarirà, emerge che il termine impatto, competitività, produttività sono veramente le parole chiave. Quindi se gli studi fanno emergere la qualità della ricerca italiana ed europea, e questo anche per noi come APRE è molto importante, quindi c'è un riconoscimento di una qualità del sistema della ricerca, ma quello che manca, ormai ci viene detto da anni e da vari anni, è la capacità di trasferire questa ricerca d'eccellenza ad un impatto, alla creazione di impresa, alla creazione di spin-off, comunque a una traduzione in termini di competitività e di produttività dell'Europa. Anche la von der Leyen nei suoi vari discorsi ha richiamato questi termini. Sentiremo quindi l'agenda trasformativa proposta dal report Heitor e le 12 raccomandazioni che loro fanno. Quindi poi Mattia, che lo introdurrai, non so se è già entrato, non credo. Un ringraziamento per la sua disponibilità. Sapete che lo studio è uscito il 18 ottobre, quindi non è riuscito a venire in nostro convegno perché usciva proprio il giorno dopo. Quindi sono notizie molto recenti e per noi è veramente anche un privilegio e un onore per APRE, grazie a Mattia e a chi ha organizzato, per poter avere in anteprima. Io a questo punto passerei la parola ad Andrea Ricci. Andrea è il presidente del nostro comitato tecnico scientifico, ma soprattutto è il presidente del nostro comitato di esperti, quindi gli esperti di APRE che hanno lavorato in passato su vari documenti, li avrete visti, tutta la valutazione mid-term, a cui era stata preceduta una consultazione, e adesso sono i volenterosi che stanno studiando le centinaia e centinaia e centinaia di pagine dei 3 report e soprattutto questo che ci verrà presentato in breve oggi. Quindi poi APRE divulgherà anche con tutti i soci, con tutti gli interessati. Quindi Andrea, se ci sei, io passerei la parola a te, ringraziandoti. Andrea, ci sei?
Ci sono, eccomi qua.
Ecco, bene, a te allora, grazie a tutti per l'attenzione, grazie.
Grazie a te Cristina e grazie a Mattia per l'organizzazione. Sì, io diciamo che vorrei approfittare di qualche minuto disponibile prima che ci raggiunga il professor Heitor per provare a contestualizzare questo incontro, perché in effetti questo incontro si inserisce in un percorso, in un processo piuttosto articolato e intenso che è iniziato ormai già da 2 anni, quando effettivamente, come ricordava Cristina, APRE ha deciso di costituire un gruppo di lavoro, un gruppo di esperti per ragionare e esprimere un posizionamento in prima battuta la valutazione midterm del programma quadro di Horizon Europe in corso, e questo è avvenuto già da più di 1 anno con una riflessione che è stata molto partecipativa, fra l'altro con il coinvolgimento non solo dei Soci APRE ma anche di altri attori della ricerca e dell'innovazione italiana. Abbiamo prodotto un documento che è stato ampiamente diffuso e ha raccolto anche un buon livello di consensi, l'abbiamo presentato al Parlamento Europeo e questo documento già evidenziava una serie di punti sui quali quello che siamo riusciti a raccogliere come input da voi tutti indicava appunto aspetti del programma quadro in corso che chiaramente hanno raccolto un gradimento elevato e sui quali ci sono essenzialmente incoraggiamenti a proseguire, ma anche una serie di aspetti critici sui quali si evidenziava la possibilità di spazi di miglioramento, con alcune prime indicazioni nella direzione di questi possibili miglioramenti. A questo primo documento è seguita una seconda fase del lavoro del nostro gruppo di esperti che era invece già orientata alla formulazione di indicazioni e di proposte per quanto riguarda il prossimo programma quadro. Continuiamo per ora a chiamarlo FP10, nonostante appunto tutte le incertezze non solo sul nome ma anche sulla struttura, e questa seconda fase del nostro lavoro ha prodotto un secondo documento che è stato pubblicato a fine giugno. Presumo che molti di voi l'abbiano visto e forse anche studiato. Questo è un documento che ancora una volta è il risultato di una concertazione più ampia possibile con gli attori della ricerca e dell'innovazione in Italia, nella quale abbiamo cercato di essere più immediatamente propositivi per quanto riguarda il futuro della programmazione della ricerca, e così facendo abbiamo formulato una serie di riflessioni sotto forma di proposte, alcune sugli aspetti più strategici e dunque sull'impostazione, l'architettura, le priorità del programma quadro, e poi una serie di indicazioni invece di proposte per quanto riguarda più gli aspetti operativi, il funzionamento, le regole del gioco e via discorrendo. Questo documento è stato anch'esso diffuso e siamo stati, credo, anzi non credo, so per certo, è stato il primo documento di posizionamento rispetto al futuro programma quadro italiano, cosa di cui credo possiamo essere orgogliosi, che però appunto è uscito a giugno in un momento in cui stavano cominciando a manifestarsi tutta una serie di altre intenzioni, proposte, riflessioni sul futuro del programma quadro, e fa sì che oggi ci troviamo in una situazione che diciamo che è in rapida evoluzione, per usare un eufemismo, nel senso che ci sono, come ricordava anche Cristina, poche informazioni certe su quello che sarà effettivamente il quadro, il programma quadro della ricerca, continuiamo a chiamarlo così, e dunque l'incontro di oggi credo che sia stato organizzato in un momento particolarmente critico e dunque potrebbe essere particolarmente utile anche per far progredire la riflessione non solo nostra, ma sperabilmente anche della Commissione. E come sapete ci sono stati nel frattempo, negli ultimi mesi, una serie di documenti pubblicati, alcuni documenti ufficiali, come ovviamente il rapporto Draghi, il rapporto Letta, ma anche una serie di posizionamenti di associazioni e di paesi. E il documento del rapporto Heitor in questo contesto è chiaramente quello che è sotto maggiore attenzione di tutti, in quanto il mandato del gruppo Heitor, che per quelli che se lo ricordano è un po' la riedizione, il riaggiornamento di quello che che 7 anni fa fu il cosiddetto rapporto Lamy, il rapporto di alto livello Lamy, su cui la Commissione basò diciamo, l'impostazione del programma quadro Horizon Europe. E dunque questo documento, questo rapporto Heitor, riprende questa metodologia, questo approccio, e questo fa sì che per noi tutti è particolarmente importante e rilevante, in quanto ci aspettiamo che la Commissione faccia riferimento esplicito e tenga conto in modo molto diretto delle raccomandazioni che il gruppo Heitor è stato chiamato a formulare. Quello che è importante tuttavia è che sì, il rapporto Heitor è certamente quello più immediatamente rilevante per noi, ma credo che sia molto significativo verificare che anche negli altri documenti di cui accennavo, in particolare Draghi, Letta, quello del Consiglio d'Europa, sono per la prima volta forse da tanti anni hanno in comune la messa al centro in modo estremamente chiaro e volontaristico della ricerca e dell'innovazione nel contesto più ampio del futuro dell'Unione Europea. Questo è un segnale certamente molto positivo di per sé, perché si riconosce quanto cruciale e centrale sia la capacità dell'Unione di generare e produrre conoscenza e eccellenze scientifiche per non solo la valorizzazione sul fronte diretto della ricerca e innovazione, ma proprio per l'economia e per la società tutta. Questo credo sia un segnale estremamente positivo che va ovviamente valorizzato e sfruttato. A fianco di questi documenti ufficiali ci sono poi una serie di segnali, vorrei dire, alcuni parlano di rumors, di voci, cioè segnali che sono più o meno espliciti e più o meno disponibili anche al pubblico, che fanno presagire, non so se possiamo parlare addirittura di terremoto, ma certamente dei grandi cambiamenti, dei cambiamenti forse radicali per quanto riguarda l'architettura, l'impostazione, il funzionamento, l'organizzazione della programmazione della ricerca europea finanziata dall'Europa. E questi segnali ci portano a dire che appunto oggi non abbiamo gli elementi dal punto di vista della posizione dell'Unione Europea per valutare quanto ci piace e quanto non ci piace, però ecco, a maggior ragione crediamo che sia un tempo opportuno per affrontare tutta una serie di problemi che si stanno delineando. Si parla addirittura della possibile sparizione del programma quadro in tanto tale, o comunque per come l'abbiamo conosciuto fino adesso, o quantomeno di un suo parziale o totale assorbimento dentro a questo fondo della competitività che è stato al centro invece del rapporto Draghi. Sono tutte prospettive che certamente potrebbero condizionare nel bene e nel male la vita di tutta la comunità di ricerca italiana e europea, e dunque l'attenzione è massima, e questo evento di oggi credo che sia un tassello aggiuntivo per alimentare questa riflessione. Tra i segnali di cui parlavo ci sono per esempio dei segnali di possibile decostruzione, frammentazione, non so come la vogliamo chiamare, del programma quadro per come lo conosciamo adesso, e questo chiaramente ha già generato tra l'altro una serie di reazioni di associazioni, di comunità, di gruppi organizzati di ricerca, alcune difensive, alcuna difensiva, altri più ottimisti, ma diciamo il dibattito è certamente in atto ed è vivace, e dunque ci piace poter dire che diamo un contributo con questo incontro e con gli altri momenti di riflessione organizzati da APRE con il gruppo di lavoro a questo dibattito, nell'attesa ovviamente di saperne un po' di più dal punto di vista di cosa ci aspetta per quanto riguarda le indicazioni della Commissione sul futuro programma quadro. Due parole ancora su come concretamente in APRE, in particolare il gruppo di esperti con il piacere di guidare, pensa di continuare a contribuire a questo dibattito. Beh, tanto per cominciare ci sarà da organizzare una riflessione su come interpretiamo sia i documenti che sono già stati pubblicati, ma a maggior ragione quelli che verranno in futuro, rispetto a quelli che erano state le indicazioni che noi abbiamo raccolto per il nostro documento di giugno. Noi abbiamo formulato una cinquantina di proposte con una serie di priorità. Queste proposte e queste priorità sono state come dire, elaborate con molta attenzione e con contributi di un po' tutti. Sarà nostra cura, nostra premura, nostra direi vocazione quella di verificare, analizzare e verificare che man mano che si riconfigura il prossimo programma quadro, questa riconfigurazione in che misura riesce a soddisfare o ad allinearsi totalmente o parzialmente con quelli che sono i desiderata espressi dalla nostra comunità. Ecco, io mi fermerei qui perché mi sembra di capire che il nostro ospite ci abbia raggiunto, dunque vi ringrazio dell'attenzione su questa breve introduzione e ridò la parola a Mattia per l'introduzione di Manuel Heitor e la moderazione dell'incontro. Grazie.
Grazie Andrea, thank you Andrea for your introduction. I think Professor Heitor joined the meeting. Professor, if you can confirm that are you in the room? Otherwise, I start my introduction.
I am already. Yes, I am.
Thank okay, so wonderful. Thank you very much. So, and welcome again to our to the APRE members and to the Italian public who is following this event. It's a real pleasure, Professor, to have you here. 1 week ago, you presented with Commissioner Ivanova and Director General Marc Lemaitre your report on the interim evaluation of Horizon Europe with recommendation for the future. So it's a special occasion to have you here. We have in the meeting 100 representatives from our APRE network, so APRE members, which represents the Italian community of research and innovation, but we have also researchers, innovators listening to us from the streaming on YouTube. So this is a real interested audience, and I think maybe it's one of the first events at the national level where you have the opportunity to present your report. We will have 20 minutes of your presentations, but feel free to also to extend to 30 minutes based on your preferences, and then we have the opportunity to a discussion, interaction with our audience. Again, I would like also to remind we had the introduction from our president Maria Cristina Pedicchio, and also an explanation of the contribution that APRE is carrying out to the process by our president by the president of our group of experts, of APRE group of experts, Andrea Ricci, and now we are ready to listen to you, and after that we will be able to start the discussion. Thank you again, Professor. The floor is yours. You are mute. I would like maybe if you can unmute.
Yes.
Perfect.
I don't know, it was automatic. Thank you so much for this brief presentation, and thank you so much for all of you for spending your time discussing our report. First and foremost, it was and it is a collective report by unanimous opinion of 15 experts, and one of them is well known in Italy, Maria Chiara Carosa, and I also want to thank you, but certainly, as discussed before with Mattia, I could not stay or be today with you in presence, but I'm sure that you can discuss also details with Maria Chiara. Our report is the result of a work over about 1 year, and essentially we try to align with the previous discussion brought by Mario Draghi in the so-called Draghi report, which was asked and commissioned by President von der Leyen, as well as with von der Leyen political documents, Europe Choice, and in a more general way with the report presented last April by Enrico Letta, that I'm sure you also understand. But we have tried to go deeper, although our alignment with these 3 high-level political documents, which will be, we hope, particularly important to drive Europe and the European Commission in the coming years, we have tried, as I was telling you, to go deeper into the research, technology, and innovation context. And actually, the title of our report expresses a need for Europe to consider the framework program as a game changer in a declining European competitive landscape, and we should address this very promptly. And therefore, we definitely argue that Europe needs to align the main financial, economic, social, and defense policies in order to give priority to research, technology, and innovation. Second, should act to put Ursula von der Leyen's goal of research and technology in the center of our economy. And last but not least, should accelerate the institutional and regulatory context in order to face the accelerated rate of change that we are living in the new landscape between research and innovation, which I will address in a minute. So this idea to align policies with research, act promptly, to make research in the center, and accelerate the institutional and regulatory context. And we try to express this idea in 12 main recommendations, but so those are written, are detailed, explained one by one in the report, and as you have seen, we have tried to express our report in a way that can be easily read, either by only the 12 recommendations, or if you want to go more detailed, you can read the framing chapter, and then we have a detailed explanation for each recommendation. But overall, I'd like to summarize these 12 recommendations for you in 3 main ideas. First, we need a strong framework program driving the advancement of market integration for Europe in a way to build European added value. Second, we need an adequate budget, and we estimate to be a minimum of 220 billion for the period 2028-34. And the third, last but not least, we need a radical simplification and radical innovations in the program, considering the actual context. Let me explore these 3 main ideas. And the question is, what do we mean by a strong framework program driving what Mario Draghi calls a research and innovation union, and not to break the framework program into different sub-programs. And we define a strong framework program as a portfolio of incentives in 4 main domains, what we call interrelated and interconnected spheres of action. Intentionally, we have not adopted the word pillar because pillar tends to be silos of funding actions, and we really understand the need of a more interconnected and interrelated spheres of action. And the 4 spheres are competitive excellence first, second, industrial competitiveness, third, societal challenge, and 4, the building up of the European research and innovation ecosystem. Let me explore a bit more each of these 3 main ideas, or of this very first idea about a strong framework program. The 4 spheres of action we define are essentially a collective portfolio because we understand year after year, decade after decade, that research and innovation do require different type of instruments with an adequate size, but the current fragmentation of the framework program should be revised for a more coherent approach. First, in competitive excellence, we certainly express the full support to the current status of the European Research Council, which has built a unique recognition worldwide, and definitely, actually following Mario Draghi, it definitely requires to have a much larger budget in order to facilitate an increase in the success rates. But the most important recommendation is also to keep the independence of the Science and Technology Council of the European Research Council. Is probably the best example of the capacity we have had in Europe to build European added value. Today, either you are in Beijing or in Washington or in São Paulo or in Cape Town in South Africa, every researcher at our level recognizes the European Research Council as an European added value for the best research produced in Europe. And we need to keep and enlarge that idea. Also, in this sphere, we clearly understand the unique value the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions have had, particularly for doctoral and more postdoctoral, but they need to be out of an increasing conflict between the different director generals which run the program, and essentially be enlarged. And we clearly claim for a new instrument within Marie Curie, which we consider to be Choose Europe, which is particularly important for countries like Italy, which are strongly affected by brain drain. And essentially, the idea to really understand the need for institutions to be funded in order to facilitate research careers, particularly for those people which have finished PhD 2 or 3 years, and they are leaving Europe. And the results are very clear of the need to enlarge and to strengthen the Marie Curie actions with a new instrument at the level of postdoctoral research careers to guarantee a better career path in Europe of young researchers. Certainly, within this action, we also clearly considered the success of the most recent years of the European Innovation Council, but we certainly understand the need to adapt and to expand some of the EIC, namely the Pathfinder, and also to clearly initiate, as already discussed a few years ago, particularly in a report published in 2020, the EIC adopting the archetype models. And this is what we consider to be the main instruments to be used or to be included in this sphere of competitive excellence. We need to understand other issues, which I will claim in a minute, particularly because 10 years ago, Europe was looking for the way to better produce startups, and we should be proud that in the last 5 years, Europe has produced more startups than the United States. The problem, though, is that the scaling up of these startups, or the growth of these startups, or at least of some of them, have not happened in Europe. And today we have data from the IC Impact Report that most of the startups that have been able to grow and to attract global markets have done it with investment funds from the United States. And definitely, there is definitely an issue on the scaling up of this disruptive innovation in Europe, and therefore the need definitely to expand and to enlarge the European Innovation Council. The new data from the ERC is also interesting as a wake-up call for Europe, as we now today have clearly the idea that ERC has sponsored unique fundamental research in Europe. And the interesting fact is that most of the startups funded by DIC have driven or derived from fundamental research sponsored by DRC in a short period of time. And this is interesting for Europe, but it clearly shows a new challenge to better adapt our research and innovation landscape to a quite accelerated rate of change, where, say, the landscape between fundamental science and disruptive innovation is more complex and is evolving very, very fast. And this clearly shows that we need to better adapt our instruments to this new landscape that we are facing, which is rather interesting in terms of science policy, but do require better instruments, particularly to keep enlarging fundamental research, but also to speed up and to enlarge the scale-up process in Europe. It should be mentioned that from the last ERC report, that most of the patents which have derived from fundamental sciences funded through the ERC have been exploited economically by large American firms and not necessarily by Europe. So there is clearly a need to better understand the scale-up of fundamental research, and particularly the growth of startups in Europe. But certainly, this is just one part of the framework program that should be complemented clearly by what we call a specific sphere on industrial competitiveness by adapting collaborative research. Definitely, with the need to better focus collaborative research in high added value products and system. Why? Currently, we have now the data either from the post-evaluation of Horizon 2020 or the strategic report the Commission has published about the last 3 years of Horizon Europe, that most of the say, the current Pillar 2 of Horizon Europe, most of the collaborative research, which accounts for about 78% of the overall budget, so it's a very large amount of money, because the remaining 22% are essentially the ERC and the IC. But the 78% is, in average, distributed to consortium with 11 partners, with a funding level per partner per year only about 127K. And this clearly shows a very interesting instrument to foster collaboration, but is not necessarily the best instrument to address industrial competitiveness, or even to address the complexity of societal challenge. And again, the distribution of funding in this way is causing problems on what certainly is the role of the framework program. And therefore, we strongly recommend that these two areas should be governed by eminent practitioners in the way the ERC has been governed in an independent way through its Science and Technology Council, and the European Innovation Council has been governed by its boards. And this is an important recommendation to create new councils to govern the areas of industrial competitiveness and societal challenge. Why we have separated? As most of you may know or may remember, societal challenge has been introduced in the European Framework Program about 15 years ago in Horizon 2020. And by that time, the discussion was very much about the unknown, how to address societal challenge, and certainly its linkage with industrial competitiveness. 8 years ago, in the transition from Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe, that discussion has also been raised in Europe, as most of you may remember, and it was also considered that it would be better to be the two together in the current Pillar 2. We have deepened this discussion and consider that we are in a status in Europe that we need to better focus industrial competitiveness and individually address societal challenge, certainly to face the climate disaster that we all are involved, but also to address other societal challenges which are increasingly important and have not been addressed, for example, by industry, and in particular by pharma industry. And I'm talking about, for example, mental health. Certainly, and this makes the research to address societal challenge, which usually are not a consensus, has been different and will be more different than the research context, the research and innovation context to address competitive excellence. And therefore, we suggest these two major goals will be differentiated with different councils to govern the program. Last but not least, say, beyond a sphere on competitive excellence, beyond industrial competitiveness, beyond societal challenge, we believe that a strong framework program should have a fourth sphere to address the European research and innovation ecosystem. And here we put major emphasis on university alliances in one side, but also the strong needs to better strengthen infrastructures, either research infrastructures and technology infrastructures. Again, here we make a claim for a clarification in Europe. As you know, research infrastructures has been first a very small program, and there are actually different ways, two main ways that have been addressed in Europe. And there is a need for a better coherence in an enlarged program, but at the same time, to build a parallel stream of technology infrastructures, which are different from research infrastructures because their main clients are companies, while the main clients, say, of research infrastructures are the universities and the academic and research community. And particularly to advance the scale-up process of disruptive innovation, we need more and more technology infrastructures, which certainly includes digital infrastructures throughout Europe. And in terms of what we consider to be a strong framework program with these 4 spheres of excellence, we also consider that we need to understand changes that we are facing in the current innovation and research landscape, either in terms of the advancements made through the use of advanced IT systems, in particular artificial intelligence, but in general, to reduce time to funding, because most of the consortiums now in Europe take at least 1 year or about 1 year of time to funding. So we suggest that apart from the establishment of these 2 new councils to run and to govern the program in the areas of industrial competitiveness and social challenge, we also suggest the building up of some experimentation to an experimental unit in the Commission services, particularly in DG RTD, to test new ways of assessment and funding. And we give the example of many different ways, particularly private foundations in Europe, but above all in the United States, are considering to decrease the time to funding. These are complex issues that requires experimentation. And so we strongly suggest the Commission should build an experimental unit to test different ways to adapt with the research and innovation communities, either in terms of the better use of AI, but also the adoption of the ARPA type model, which in our opinion should start with the EIC, but that should be enlarged to the full framework program, and this requires experimentation. So this is, say, our set of ideas we express under this overall concept of having a strong framework program, which was my first idea. The second idea is about the budget for Europe. As you know, this is a complex issue, particularly that will be discussed within member states and collectively in the Council, in the European Parliament, and in the Commission. If we pretend to be all this considered high quality proposals funded, we will have or need to have over 250 B. So we estimate an adequate budget of 220 B for these 8 years, which will be complex, very complex to get. In addition to a second requirement, which is that all high excellent proposals should be funded, because we are having in Europe a large number of unfunded high-quality proposals. But this should be get in collaboration with the framework program, plus the European structural funds, and plus national funds, making use or making a better use of seals of excellence. As you may remember, some 10 years ago, we have created in Europe the so-called seals of excellence for highly qualified proposals that don't get European funding, so that they could be funded through other European instruments and, above all, national instruments. What we have now today is that seals of excellence have not been used, with the notable exception of Lithuania and Malta. And therefore, we claim that there is a need to better articulate national agencies, the structural funds with the DGRTD and the framework program to guarantee the use of seals of excellence to avoid such a high number of highly qualified proposals that have not been funded in Europe. So in terms of budget, these are the two suggestions we make. Increase the framework program to 220 billion for 8 years and guarantee a better adequate or a better articulation of national, structural, and the framework programs. Last but not least, the third idea we launched the Commission, and I will conclude with this, is about a radical simplification, which again we claim could be used and tested to an experimental unit, because we are having now a very long time to funding, a very long time for the preparation of proposals, but more than that, extremely high, and in our view, unacceptable transaction costs. Actually, the Commission data for Horizon 2020 is clear to show that for a budget of 77 billion, the Commission services spend about 4.4 in terms of administrative costs, which are not very high, 6%, so it's typical in funding agencies, and many of national funding agencies in Europe actually have higher values for administrative costs. But then we know that these transaction costs have ranged between 5 and 10 billion. So overall, transaction costs plus administrative costs are as high as about 12 to 19%. And we know that in part, this has been associated to the complexity of the application processes, to many issues associated with social impact and economic impact, which have caused or have resulted in many of the proposals, particularly research institutions and universities, to contract consultants to run the proposals and the projects. And this overall has resulted in very high transaction costs, which should be simplified, particularly by a radical simplification in the application process. Certainly, when we address radical simplification, we also see that the program has become too fragmented with too many small initiatives, and that some of them which are not necessary should be closed, at least as funding line. And we give the examples of the European Institute of Technology, that particularly the KICs have acquired its autonomy, so they don't need a special funding line, or the so-called European innovation ecosystem, which can be considered together with all the other initiatives, and so there is a need for a focus. But within this idea of radical simplification in innovation, we also try to claim the need for the Commission to better understand issues which usually are in the margin of the program. First and foremost, innovation procurement. We know that the scaling up of our startups will require drafting a better understanding of and use of innovation procurement throughout Europe, through the articulation of the framework program with many other instruments. Second is a new interpretation of global cooperation. Again, we give the example of the increasing cooperation between American and Chinese scientists, even or although an increasing fight between the economy of the two countries, but certainly we need to understand that the global cooperation should have an instant granular understanding, and definitely the rise of Chinese science should be a wake-up call for Europe, and our best scientists should definitely collaborate more with those in China and in the United States. because the numbers show a very small collaboration with these major scientific power houses. So again, these are very broad. I don't want to go into details. There is one final context on this type of radical innovation, which is a better understanding of defense research, and to avoid this definition of dual use, which has been introduced or have been attempted to be introduced in Europe. Our understanding is that all research and all science results are ubiquitous, either from biomedical research to advanced IT systems. And therefore, Europe and the Commission should not create an independent package of dual-use systems because, again, all the research is ubiquitous. And either we can classify or military research, particularly for weapon preparation, or everything else, and to avoid a further complexity of the program in association with the eventual use of a definition of eventual use of a definition of dual use. But say, this is our main, say, 3 ideas expressed in 12 recommendations. And I conclude to say that overall, we need in Europe to align policies towards a better research and innovation in a declining European situation, to act promptly, and to accelerate the institutional landscape, particularly in a way that the framework program can be centered on people and a better understanding of bottom-up research. We have too many prescriptive goals, and we need a better compromise between bottom-up and top-down, particularly giving emphasis to bottom-up research and innovation. And we have, again, excellent examples in Europe, particularly through the European Research Council. So nevertheless, we claim that we Europeans should be proud by the 40 years of the framework program in its evolution, but in the last years, it has become so fragmented and essentially a tool to distribute money and needs to be revisited. And we provide an approach for that the discussion. So thank you very much for this, because again, our report expresses our ideas, but the most important over the next 2 years, the most important is the role of people like you doing advocacy in the member states, in this case in Italy, in the Commission, in the European Parliament, because we are entering what I will call a brutal fight for the preparation of the next multi-annual financial plan, 2028-34, which will take over the coming 2 years, again, at the council level among all the member states, and in Brussels at the European Parliament and the Commission. And again, we need a strong advocacy for doing that. Your voice is very, very important, together with others. We have been also looking at many position papers and articulating scenarios with main industrial leaders like the European Roundtable of Industrialists or Business Europe, but also a number of, or the main university and research associations like alto, or the university associations like Leroux, the guilds of CESAR. So they are strong organizations which should articulate a collective voice in Europe. And that is my main message to all of you, because our report is an instrument that needs to be used. And the way it is used depends very much on the advocacy that will take place in the years to come by people like you. So my strong advice and suggestion, my strong message is that APRE, among others, should articulate a collective voice in Europe. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Manuel, for this overview. First of all, on the context, on the perspectives of the research and innovation in Europe, but also for describing some specific measures that your report has put on the table. I also want to thank you for reminding our role in shaping the next generation of research and innovation funding, and the role that the research and innovation community has at national level, at European level, in influencing, in advocate for a strong research and innovation funding in the next European budget. I already have some of our members, some of the members requesting to speak, but if other people that have not requested to intervene want to speak, you can use the Teams raising hand instrument, and I will give you the floor. I recommend you to be short as far as it's possible. And maybe, Manuel, if it's okay for you, I would group maybe 3 or 4 questions and then give you to reply, and then we will have a second round.
Yes.
Guido Castelli, please introduce yourself, also identify your organization. Guido. Guido, you are mute.
Oh, yes, sorry about that. Good morning to everybody. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please.
Okay. I'm Guido Castelli. I'm in charge from the research department in Catholic University Milan, and I belong to the board of APRE, and then I'm the coordinator of the international research group of interest for CODA, which is the association for the general manager of the Italian university. I have a couple of questions. First of all, in your first of all, thank you for your job, because I think that was very tough and very long job. First question, during your recommendation in the 3rd, in the 4th, in the 5th, in the 6th, and the 7th, you used the word council as instrument. Okay, you spot a sort of need, and in order to face this need, you say, okay, we should have a council in order to face this need, and in a deep way. I want just to know what you mean with council. Is that an instrument? Do you see, as a group of people, or I don't know. I mean, it's just a question. Second question, you were talking about these 3 years, okay? Because what I wanted to ask you is that if in these 3 years there will be some changes in order to go towards the new structure, or we remain as it is, or the program will remain as it is now. Are these 2 questions clear enough?
Yes. Shall I answer now? Wait for the others.
No, I wait. Yeah, I would wait for the others, and if it's okay for you, Armando, if you want to reply immediately, we have a question. We have a question on the chat as well about partnership admissions from Chiara Carbonaro from Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna. And I will ask you to reply afterwards as well. If it's about how you envision the placement of those 2 instruments in the next framework program. Let's now. I'm seeing that we have 2 other people requesting to speak. Verdiana Bandini from University of Bologna. Verdiana, please. And I ask you to activate to turn your camera on if it's possible, because
yes,
only you can do so. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Sure. First of all, thank you very, very much for this very clear presentation and interesting one as well. My question would be about, I would like to connect to what you said about the impact that the projects funded by the European Research Council had on innovation as well. So the possibility to provide innovation starting from the so-called fundamental research. And I was wondering whether it is possible to envision a, again, bottom-up collaborative scheme, which is not steered since the beginning towards innovation like the Pathfinder scheme is. So I just wondered if you considered this in your debate in preparing the report, because let's say there are some doubts about the fact that having a Pathfinder instrument, which was successful, as you mentioned, which is already needs to provide already from the proposal stage a clear path towards innovation, maybe can be limiting somehow in terms of breakthrough innovation potential. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Verdana. Let's take the last one from this round. And I have Francesco Salvato from IRI. Please, Francesco.
Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon. This is Francesco Salvato. I represent IRI. It's an Italian association of industrial research and is a member of IRI. And we are active since 50 years now. And for your information, we are having a group working on FP10, let me say, envisioning which will be nice to have in FP10, whatever it will be, as you said. And let me say that we carefully read as a group the document that you presented. And let me say that your presentation was much interesting and clarifying a lot of points that reading just the paper as it was were let's say, ambiguous. I want just to give you not a question, but 2 or 3 reflections on that have been matured into the group and that are, let me say, aligned. I would say the name is Omen to the document that you prepared. So first of all, I would reconnect to the comment made by Professor Castelli about the Innovation Council, or this council that you would like to lead or to take care of this, let's say, innovation stuff. I would say we understand very well the point. Nevertheless, we want to warn about the fact that the different industrial sector and so on could be very different in terms of timing, as you perfectly know, content, size, and so on. This implies that the tough job that they will have in order to set the priority and to find the common, let me say, metric to define it, it will be very tough. This is a point of reflection. We have no solution, but it's something that has to be considered. Then the other 3 points, but very simple, not an answer. Beyond the definition of industrial competitiveness that you said, probably is necessary to highlight what is innovation. Innovation is the transition of a result of a research into something that is useful and with new features or completely new features that are going on and be competitive against the other at the state of the art. If we don't say this very clearly, it will be a problem in, let me say, we run the risk to have just incremental project. As you said, in order to make this innovation, we need the convergence of many different funds, and this implies that we need some synergies. As you said, Professor Heitor, we need to to increase the size of the things in order to have this innovation. And we foresee that synergies are important. And for that, we need a specific tool promoting this synergy. And finally, if I may say, this is a need raised by all our associates. We need the implementation tool in the sense as a partnership, collaborative research, and let's say the way to make them align each other in order that we do not disperse resources in different things. The idea to have an APA-like, let me say, EIC in the future could be very helpful. And there we can converge, let me say, if the synergy instrument is made available by EC, we can converge the, as you said, cohesion fund and so on. It's all work to be done. I stop here because otherwise I am too long.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Francesco. Manuel, to reply to those four inputs, and then we will go to the next round. Manuel, please.
Thank you so much for these questions and for your engagement. First, about councils, what it is. 15 years ago, we built, after 4 years or 5 years of discussion, and probably some of you have also been involved in that discussion, the building up of the European Research Council. Before that, we didn't know what we have. But now we have a council which addresses essentially fundamental research and bottom-up fundamental research in all areas, from humanities to social sciences to exact sciences, biomolecular research, and essentially technical engineering and the engineering sciences. So we built a council which runs through, or is governed through a science and technology council made of eminent practitioners, essentially top scientists. And this has been able to create enormous reputation in Europe and European research. 5 years ago, a similar strategy, although with different details, was used to build the European Innovation Council, again, by bringing or building or establishing a board with eminent practitioners in the area of innovation. And again, addresses the process of funding and scaling up startups in the most different areas, from biomolecular science to technical issues, space science, and also social issues. So what we argue is that based on these lessons learned, particularly in the way the European Research Council was built, we should govern the remaining of the program, which accounts for about 78 to 80% of the budget, so it's a very large quantity, in the same way, by building up a council to better address research towards industrial competitiveness, and another council to better address research towards societal challenge. And the difference is to bring eminent practitioners to govern the program instead of relying on the bureaucracy of member states and the European Commission. And this is a big and a radical change in the way the program is governed, and because we have now the unique experience of the ERC and more recently of the IC. And therefore the idea is to use those experiences to govern the remaining of the program in a similar way, to address better bottom-up research, to decrease the extent up to application forms are so much prescriptive in Europe. And definitely the best way to have practitioners in the governance of the program is to build this type of councils, as we have done in the IC and in the ERC. So using exactly the same type of configuration. And again, the type of people should be different, but we believe we have in Europe top people And once these councils and the group of people they bring, they do not address the assessment of the proposals, the conflict of interest issue can be easily solved. But the point is, use the same strategy that was used in ERC and more recently in EIC to govern the remaining of the program and to give to practitioners the governance of the program. The question about the 3 years, what we suggest is that our recommendation, and please note, this is a recommendation. I should note that I do not represent the Commission. The expert group are a group of 15 independent people. So we recommended the Commission to adopt our recommendations in the coming 3 years and then to build the next framework program based on the experimentation over the next 3 years. There was a point or a brief question written on missions and partnerships. We believe that missions have done extremely well. It took time. There is many reports about the way missions have been implemented. Usually, we know that, again, the implementation of the missions did not follow the original design, particularly in terms of the institutional responsibility, because missions and partnerships have been implemented through the usual mechanism of many small collaborative research projects. And the initial idea was not exactly that, particularly in the missions, was to engage institutions with larger and longer time frame for the project. But above all, it was also identify a lack of political ownership of the missions. And therefore we say, and we know, that certainly the framework program and the GRTD should continue to fund and to account for the research part of the missions. But in all the missions, there are many other areas which are very, very critical and go beyond, far beyond the scope of the framework program or the GRTD. For instance, the cancer mission, which is doing extremely well, even though it needs a better, for instance, articulation with the European Cancer Bid Plan. Or, in general, the cancer mission to succeed needs to certainly be centered in research, but go beyond the research in terms of the DL system at national and European level. The same, for instance, happens with the mission on sustainable cities. Certainly, the research component is absolutely critical, but we understand that the mission will be, the success of the mission depends very much on the engagement of cities throughout Europe and of city councils. So there are, in all, and we can claim the same for the soil quality, for the oceans, or for the climate mission. All of them have started through research, but they need to engage other areas of the public administration at European and national level. And therefore, the best way would be the missions to be elevated out of the framework program and to have the political ownership of a vice president of the European Commission that can bring different director generals and essentially better articulate the missions with the national administrations. And this is a role which goes far beyond the research and innovation scope. And therefore, they need to continue, but to consider and to manage and to govern at an higher level, particularly in the European Commission in articulation with member states. And the partnerships are a similar but more focused issue on the research, which will be better governed by the two councils we have mentioned, particularly in a way to have the ultimate goal of sponsoring and stimulate business expenditure in R&D. Don't forget that if the missions were also oriented initially to bring many actors together, not only research actors, and that has still to be done, the partnerships was done essentially in areas to really attract industry and guarantee that the public funding will be used to stimulate a better engagement and increase in the private expenditure. And again, with notable exception, that has not been seen. And therefore, the governance of both missions and partnerships should be particularly strengthened in terms of the need for the framework program, definitely, to lead with the research part, but the other components do need an understanding which goes beyond the research area. Your comment, the third question of DIC Pathfinder, I totally agree. And particularly if you look at our recommendation number 5, we go quite deep in the discussion of the different parts of DIC because of the need to better evolve over time and expand the ICU, which in the current framework program has a very small budget, and certainly it's I totally agree with you. About the comments Francisco Salvato did, I believe I answered already to the councils. The synergies, I totally agree with you. The synergies not only at an European, but between European and national issues. And again, to put this into practice, we need to better understand how member states can and should use, for instance, seals of excellence, which were created to foster synergies in terms of funding agencies throughout Europe, but it has not worked until now. And again, I totally agree with your comment on the need to introduce in the IC, or at least in part of the IC, the APRE type mechanisms, which again are very complex to be implemented. And in our report, if you see recommendation number 4 and the recommendation number 5, we clearly go deep into this discussion, also using the experience of Germany over the last few years, since 2019, when in Germany it was created a new agency, SPRINT, to implement the APRE type funding, and there is many difficulties. And more recently, in the United Kingdom, they also create a new agency, REA, to adopt the APRE type funding. And the main, again, there are a few points because of the complexity of this, but the main point is that the APRE type model rely on highly competent, highly and paid program managers, which are very autonomous in their operation. And this is completely different from the type of agencies we have in Europe, either in member states or in the European Commission, which are essentially more and more operating by the typical national or European bureaucracy. So APRE do require a completely different manpower in terms of skills, but in terms of salary levels, and above all in terms of autonomy of the program managers. Apart from mechanisms, very fast decision processes and larger budgets. But the question of program management and the autonomy of program managers runs completely or totally different from the current understanding of our public agencies in Europe, including in the Commission. That is reason why this needs to be adapted gradually, and is a great challenge. Again, in terms of DIC, there is a report which I reference in our text, published by the end of 2020, in order to include in DIC the archetype models. And so we argue there is not a need for more reports because that has already been done. But thank you so much for your questions. And if you have any other point, I would be pleased. We still have 10 minutes to go. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Manuel. Can you stay for, a couple of just other 10 minutes, or you need to leave at 4 p.m.? Okay, you can stay. Perfect. I would ask also all the people to keep questions very short so we can give the floor to as many people as possible. I have now Gabriele Ballero from the Human Technopole, and I would like to ask Renzo Tomellini from Leonardo to be ready. Gabriele.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for this opportunity. I think that my first consideration, I'm very happy about the new role proposed for Seal of Excellence. But looking at the Italian backyard, I think it's very useful for strengthen the research in Italy. My question, Director, I think, do you think it would be useful to recover an old instrument from FP5 to FP7, the old future emerging technology instrument for disruptive research, not directly linked to industrial needs? In my personal opinion, experience, something that will be very useful to fertilize the ground of the research, and then also strengthen the European research, and also at the end also industrial sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gabriele. Renzo Tomellini, please.
Muito obrigado, Professor Heitor. So there is the Letta report, the Draghi report, the Heitor report. Now we are also waiting for the Niinistö report, your colleague, ex-Prime Minister of Finland. So extremely important what you say. And from the industrial point of view, I am now with Leonardo, who is leading aerospace, defense and cyber company, and also what is related to the connected services. So extremely important this involvement of industry that you propose, and the fact that you propose to test it already in the remaining years of Horizon Europe. So you are very courageous when you mention innovation prizes, ARPA-type programs, and various innovative methods. You say, Commission, go further, do it now and test it. So thank you for this. Very, very simply, I have a few points about your sphere of actions. Traditionally, we have seen that in the co-decision, in particular, your colleagues in the European Parliament, they like to maintain the technological profiles. So those who want more money for agriculture, those who want more money for space, those who want more money for transport, those who want more money for other issues and healthcare or whatever you may mention. So how do you think that the Parliament might react on this very strong integrated approach that you propose? Well, as we saw that traditionally the Parliament was more discipline oriented. Other point, if you want to share with us about the simplification of the private-public partnerships, or the public-public partnerships. Very powerful to rationalize and align what is invested at the level of member states and the Commission, the public-public, and very powerful for orienting what industry is doing and helping, inducing industry working for a common good, the private-public. Do you see a simplification possible there? Because they start being many. Already in the debate for Horizon Europe, you may well remember that there was an effort to plan already. And then the last point you mentioned is that Italy affected by brain drain. Yeah, Italy affected by brain drain, but also affected by the fact that not enough young people go into STEM disciplines, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Do you have a thinking to share with us about how to recruit more young people with open mindset to multidisciplinarity? Because the point is not to create new closed cupboard, but to having bright minds who go into STEM or are able to link SSH and STEM, so to have real competitive and innovative and socially useful innovation to the benefit of the socio-economic system in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renzo. Other two questions from this round, Sabrina Bozzoli and Valentina Romano. Sabrina.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sabrina Bozzoli, responsible for the grant office of the Università Campus Biomedico di Roma, a small and young university, private one. Thanks, first of all, thanks for this interesting meeting. I have still some questions about the councils, if I can. Whilst the European Societal Challenges Council sounds more, let's say, cross-thematic and cross-cutting in terms of overall approach along the different pillars, if my interpretation is right, the other one, the Industrial Technology and Competitiveness Council, is meant to orient the EU industrial competitiveness with a focus on the, let's say, current second pillar of Horizon Europe. So my question, since I see many overlaps with the existing EU partnership, where industrial leaders are represented and strongly contribute to the definition of Horizon Europe cluster R&D strategy and call for proposals, I was wondering whether your expert group has already addressed this concern, so the concern about overlapping, and if so, which elements in your idea will distinguish this new council from the existing structures and networks? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sabrina. Valentina, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Manuel. Thank you very much. My question is, given the economic security package, the geopolitical challenges, and the focus on competitiveness in industry, which will be the role of open science? Would it be still the same? Are there changes in approach? Thank you.
Thank you, Valentina. Manuel, you prefer to take also the last 2 or 3 questions and then a final reply from you? Is okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Danilo Aceto, please, Danilo.
This is Danilo Aceto from the University of Roma, Tor Vergata, the grant office. I was reading the report. Thank you very much for your effort. On the recommendation number 12, I was reading to increase national security and defense expenditure by exploiting dual use both ways, optimizing synergies with the military research, for example, with the EDF program, which is the European Defense Program. Well, the framework program has always financed civil use research during the last 40 years. So something has changed because of the new geopolitical context. Will the FP number 10 finance also military research? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Danilo. Federica Vannetti from Fondazione Dognocchi. Federica, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Professor Heitor, for your explanation of the report. I have a question about the healthcare system, and in these last years, the rapid growth of technological solutions such as AI, digital therapeutics, and so on, could significantly improve the sustainability of patient care of the healthcare system, and how this recommendation could be deployed to accelerate the integration of these new technologies in the healthcare systems.
Thank you so much, Federica. I probably have the last intervention from Francesca Mura from University of Padova. Francesca, I don't know if you can intervene.
Yes, I'm
Perfect.
here. Hi, thank you so much for your intervention and for your effort and your work. I've actually quite a practical question. I was thinking, what suggestions would you give universities in terms of investments they could make to actually be better prepared to face the next 3 years in terms of, for example, investment in competences? You were mentioning the importance of research support, for example, and also what is the role you feel of data monitoring for universities in order to better face these challenging times, and what is ahead of us? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Francesca. Manuel, the floor is yours to reply.
Thank you. This is like an exam. I'm exhausted. Thank you so much for your engagement and the way you put these questions. We have about 6 or 7 questions. I will go one by one. But before to start, please note, this is considered to be an independent, say, expert report with an advice to the Commission, and at the same time to the Parliament and to the Member State. So this is our opinion, which got consensus among the 15 people, but certainly this needs to be discussed. When we look back, say 8 years ago, there was so-called Lamy report, which actually included the missions, the creation of the IC and others, but many of other recommendations were not implemented. If we look at the report 15 years ago in the transition from FP7 to Horizon 2020, also some recommendations were implemented, others not. So again, I do not represent the Commission. We were asked to put this report, and now we will see how it goes. But more than see, we believe, and this is the reason I'm here working with you, we need a strong advocacy in Brussels and in all member states. And I will do meetings like this throughout Europe in the coming months, is because apart from writing these reports, and some of you mentioned, we have now the Draghi report, the Letter report, this report, and many others. The point is that how to use these reports to make change happens, particularly in this case, to make sure that the framework program becomes an effective game changer to face the European declining competitiveness, either in science or in the economy. Don't forget that when we look at European science, we certainly have, particularly to face the rise of Chinese science, a declining scope, either measured in terms of number of the fraction of top-level publications, and we also know about the declining of European competitiveness. Actually, in these terms, let me recall some colleague of yours and the University of Bocconi, Fuente et al., together with colleagues in the School of Economics of Toulouse, have produced a few months ago, in May, I believe, a very interesting report. We may not agree with all the recommendations, but their analysis is rather interesting in terms of what they consider to be the mid-tech trap in Europe. In other words, in the last 20 years, particularly the framework program, has focused very, very much on low and medium tech technologies, particularly associated with the automobile industry, to protect and to try to preserve the European automobile industry. And this has created a concentration in the research funding, which is totally different from that in the United States and certainly in China. But they argue for the need to escape this mid-tech trap, particularly by concentrating on high added value products and systems in order to not only diversify our economic structure, but also to create better and more jobs and to create wealth in Europe. So these are important issues where the framework program is not certainly the only instrument, is a very important instrument, and in our opinion, we have an opportunity. We have many challenges, but we have an opportunity to have a good instrument focused essentially on the European added value, instead of just being an instrument to distribute funds. And this is a big challenge because with notable exceptions like the ERC for fundamental research and the EIC for disruptive innovation, the remaining of the program has been more and more a process to distribute money without clear focus on high added value, European added value. And this idea to build a strong Europe is definitely very much consistent with the latter report and more with the Draghi report. So apart from this, so our report is a recommendation, and again, please, your voice is important like all the other voices in Europe, and what I'm trying to do more and more is to guarantee that we have a collective voices between industry and research institutions, including universities, together into this process, because it will be a brutal fight around the funding schemes for the coming years. Let me start by Gabriel. The seals of excellence, I totally agree, but this is a clear difficulty. They were created in Europe, but they have not been used. So we recommend certainly to be used, but that depends on the national authorities, because either structural funds, they are managed in a decentralized way, particularly at the regional level, and most of the national funds could have used seals of excellence, but have not. So this is essentially a national issue throughout the 27, or if you want 26, or 25, because only Lithuania and Malta have effectively used seals of excellence. Your point to bring the old instruments to disruptive innovation, my understanding, and I may be wrong, is that they were included in the EIC already. And the EIC does, in fact, integrate not only the SME instruments, but most of the instruments associated with disruptive innovation. And I will rather say, as you see in our recommendation, we go quite deep in the EIC because there are many actions to be taken at that level. About Renzo Tomasini from Leonardo, thank you so much. I know very well Leonardo and your key role in Europe. You bring very complex the discussion, because I certainly understand what you mean by a disciplinary orientation of the European Parliament, essentially between agriculture in one side, the research in the others, the defense issues. But this is the normal political life. That is the reason why I say that our report, like the other mentions, are instruments to be used now in advocacy. And again, what I urge you is people like you to speak with the members of the European Parliament. I've been meeting some of them, particularly in those more oriented for research, but also we should be very clear when I mention we will face in the coming 2 years a brutal fight in Europe is essentially also at the European Parliament level between different groups which defends different areas. And we know that in the last decades, for instance, the agriculture, the people protecting the agriculture funds have been very, very strong. And we can say that research and innovation is always, it should be in the center of our economy. Research and innovation is critical for agriculture and modern agriculture, like is critical for modern medical care, or is critical for modern defense. So research and innovation should be in the center of all the economic and social activities. But even though we know that there are very organized groups in the national parliaments and the European Parliament, and that is the reason why, fortunately enough, we live in democracies in Europe, and these do require a strong advocacy process. And institutions or firms like Leonardo are certainly a very strong voice in Europe. And therefore, what we want is to suggest your involvement into these discussions, which will come in the next 2 years. Again, the European decision-making process is a democratic and very complex process among member states, with European Parliament and the Commission, and therefore these do require a strong collective advocacy into this process. If you ask me if simplification is possible, I do believe yes. Because when we look back, and we have been working on this for many, many years. Actually, I started working as a doctoral student in the first and second framework program. So we have seen the evolution of the framework program in many areas. Actually, FP6 and FP7 have included a number of simplifications. But also in Horizon 2020, and particularly in Horizon Europe, there have been more and more complex issues with first a large, say, diversification and fragmentation of the program in many, many sub-programs, but also the inclusion of many other issues in the application forms, particularly outside the technical part of the proposals. And that is what we claim should be simplified. And in addition, we believe there is the need of, say, an experimental unit to test new assessment and funding models. You also bring this question of young people going to STEM. The situation is very much different throughout Europe. And I understand that in Italy, there is a need to better stimulate that. Currently, that is an area which do not address the traditional research and innovation issues, but is a very critical area by promoting science education, science culture, and at large. The framework program has adopted that. It is taken this as a national responsibility, like education is, but there are excellent examples in Europe of programs to raise scientific culture and to bring more kids to the STEM area. In my own program, so-called Ciência Viva Network, is a network of science centers, of science schools, of science farms. And again, this context under which science centers work, and I know there are some also in Italy, is particularly important in their articulation with schools. So what I say is that we know already how to do this in Europe. It has been addressed in many parts of Europe through particularly an increasing role between schools and science centers, addressing either families or the education system. And we need to do more and more of that, particularly in the facing the current scheme. Again, this is an area where certainly the framework program should touch, but it depends more and more on national funds, and if possible, like I saw in many European countries, also with the support of structural funds. The next question by Sabrina Buzzoli from Rome says about the councils and the duplicate of existing structures, but that is not our intention. Again, the main issue these days is that those existing structures, like the partnerships or in some clusters, they just govern very, very small sub-programs. And what we argue is that the overall program should have a council in the way the ERC was created, and more recently the EIC, to govern the full program. And that should be the role of these councils, and they should decide then which are the other smaller structures to be developed. But it is not our role to duplicate what exists. It's essentially to have a better governance, and above all, to bring people like yourselves throughout Europe to govern the program instead of the traditional bureaucracy at national and European levels. And that's, again, 20 years ago, we didn't know that we'll be able to do that. But the building up of DRC gave us a unique experience worldwide that we can do that, to ask, say, eminent practitioners to govern the program. So we are arguing that the same experience should be done in other areas without duplicating existing structure. Actually, they should engage them and try to have an overall governance of the different sub-programs. Valentina Romano addresses a very critical topic, but this requires a longer discussion and a deep, and I strongly recommend you to go into details about our recommendation number 11 about the way we should adopt a nuanced, granular, and proposed-driven approach to international collaboration, where definitely we also address the issue of, say, research security. But this is nothing about the context to open science. Certainly, open science has different dimensions. One of them is the need to avoid the systemic, say, evaluation of careers associated with a quantification of publications, but also to better open the development of science to people at large and worldwide. And what we definitely do, we should consider that as much within the research community, but we need to understand that globally, the geopolitical context has dramatically changed, and the research security cannot be done overall just in a limited way. Actually, if you look at the recommendations adopted by the National Science Foundation in the United States for research security, they actually ask for a project-by-project understanding of this, and essentially a new role of scientists need to understand better what means research security, because we need to recognize that countries can be partners, competitors, or systemic rivals, And the same country will be all of these in different domains of research and innovation. For instance, in the areas of climate change, of electrical vehicles, or high-tech semiconductor chips. So we need to better understand this in a project-by-project base, and do not just adopt an overall strategy to block all the research domains, because that will deteriorate the development of research. Is this easy to implement? No, it's a complex issue. But again, complex issues cannot and should not be simplified. They need to have a complex understanding at the level of national agencies and European agencies, particularly the Commission, adopting very much a project-by-project case, and not try to block research overall without better understanding what is happening in a very detailed case study. And for that, we need program managers with enough skills. So this is an issue which is critical. And this relates very much to the question Danilo Assetto from University of Rome Tor Vergata have mentioned about our recommendation number 12 about the dual use. I would like to clarify, because we are not telling that the framework program should go to military research. We are not telling that. We are telling that we should avoid the building up of a new block of dual use, because actually all the research is ubiquitous, has a ubiquitous nature. We all benefit from defense research. See, for instance, the case of artificial intelligence or material science, or the use of drones, the development of drones, of the internet itself. And therefore, because all research is ubiquitous, there is only the need to consider and to administer the programs as either military R&D or everything else. But we do not need to create a third division of dual use projects. That is what we say. And certainly, the framework program has not been and should not be oriented to military R&D, but it should not be blocked or introduce new divisions in terms of so-called dual use. And certainly, we need to understand that in Europe, we will benefit from the need to increase national security and defense expenditures, like, for instance, in the United States, that has been done over the last century. Let me pass for Frederica Vanetti about healthcare system. Again, this is one area which research is critical, but it goes far beyond the research domain. Nevertheless, we know that in the biomedical area, we need more and more a better understanding of basic research and interactions with clinical research, and essentially the context of translational research, which we know from many assessments in Europe compared to others, particularly in the United States, we are still lacking in many countries and European regions the context for a true advanced translational research, particularly in association with hospitals and hospital research. But again, this can only be done with a better integration of the research systems with the health systems. We know it is very complex. At the end of the day, it depends on institutions and on people. But again, there are very interesting and very good cases throughout Europe of this very close relationship between the research institutions and the biomedical research, the hospital, and the advanced training of people through the universities, considering also not only the basic research, but also the translational research, and in many aspects, the clinical research. Again, it depends people in the different domains, in the universities, in the hospitals, and in the research institutions to speak and to interrelate with themselves. And we know that healthcare systems have an enormous pressure to treat patients, and the time they devote to research is not uniform throughout Europe. Nevertheless, there are excellent cases that should be used as our references. Again, when we look at the cancer mission, there have been many groups which are very active in these areas. Is a great challenge for Europe, which has a very high quality health system in general, but we need to do more and more research. And again, this goes to such a detailed area that we cannot claim everything to the European framework program. It depends certainly on the strong articulation with national systems, and in most of the time with institutions, with different health-related institutions, and I'm speaking about hospitals, biomedical research, and universities and schools of medicine, which are very critical in this area. The last question from Francesca Mora is about universities, what universities should do. This is an interesting question. I'm also a university professor, and I was many years Minister of Science and Higher Education. The best thing universities should have is to preserve their autonomy. Usually, we see many university leaders claiming for funding more than for autonomy. My recommendation, if you ask me what universities should do, is to preserve their autonomy, and should be universities themselves and their active researchers and teachers and students to decide what they do. University autonomy is probably one of the most critical components of a democracy. And therefore, if you ask me in this way, I will answer exactly. Strengthen their autonomy. But to face the current European situation, our report is very clear on the clear need to increase the quality of the research and academic work. And therefore, we suggest the Commission to expand the Marie Curie program to include a new program that we call Choose Europe for a Research Career, particularly to guarantee the improvement of careers and career development in the universities. Actually, I know that this is a topic that several university associations are looking carefully. For instance, I've been working a lot with the CESAR network on research careers, particularly in a way that we need to make sure that we speed up the improvement of careers for young researchers in Europe. There was a manifesto, and the Council of the European Union launched this initiative, also calling for the Commission to build up an observatory, which is just starting, but within their own autonomy, the way we look at the careers of our researchers and academic staff in Europe is absolutely critical, particularly depending on a process which has been adopted, in my way, wrongly in many universities, which is a strong coupling between project funding and contract duration. In other words, once many universities are strongly dependent on projects which have a limited time duration, they contract researchers on the exact duration of the project. It does not need like that. And this coupling between project funding and research contracts have created an enormous precarity in the research jobs in the European universities. And this needs to be abolished through better management practices at the university levels. Again, it will never happen overnight, but it has become a key issue in many universities. And again, there are many institutions working on these fields. There are national incentives, institutional incentives, and we claim for a better European incentive to promote European careers in Europe. And we also mention in our report, if you see in recommendation number 10, the idea that the university alliances should should be better funded to explore certain student mobility, joint and double degrees, but also joint research contracts in order to make sure that we improve research careers at an European level. But ultimately, I would say that the best investments universities should do is to preserve their own autonomy. And certainly, we need to understand the complexity of our increasing research and innovation landscape. And therefore, universities have a clear role to play in the advanced training and the advancing knowledge overall, and that will require more and more working with the outside world, with industry in particular, with research and technology organizations and research performing organizations in a way to build and to be to stimulate a strong research and innovation ecosystem, which universities are a strong partner, but need to partner with other institutions. Thank you so much for this set of about
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you for your incredible availability. I want just like to give the floor to our director, Marco Falsetti, to close, and thank you again. Director, please.
Yes, good afternoon. It was a long day, and thank you again, Professor Heitor, and thank you, Manuel, for your availability, not only today, but in the previous months that you did with us in APRE during the preparation of the report. And thank you again to be here just 1 week after the first official presentation of the report. So we are very keen to address discussion with you today. So I don't want to say nothing about what you say, because there was so many things. Thanks again for that. And many interesting questions from our members. I want to take just one point that is for you, but also for our member that represent probably the large part of the Italian community active in a framework program. And the message is clear. The future is in front of us. There are a lot of pending questions to solve. We don't know how the future framework program, or in any case, RNI program that we support the competition or the European system will be done. We don't know the shapes that will be in the future, but there is a clear message that I want to use as a keeping message for home is from Professor Heitor, and that is the future in front of us is also dependent on our role as a community to contribute to the discussion. And whatever will be the role of Professor Heitor, the Professoressa Maria Chiara Carrozza, but whatever will be, each of us as a member of community of an RNI active community has the possibility, but also the duty to influence the future. And I want to use the concept of the use of words influence in a proper way, not in a wrong way. That means trying to do our best to give our contribution to the discussion in order that the future will represent as much as possible the interests of the RNI community. Clearly, nobody of us want to change the important highlights that the Commission has already addressed with several documents in the recent weeks for the future of Europe. But I'm sure that probably today we are confused about how the future will be shaped. But we are sure that the R&I, research and innovation, will be important players to shape the future of the new MFF, and so also the new primer program, or whatever it will be. So please don't stop the game. The game is not over. The game is just starting. The Professor Heitor the group of experts managed by the Professor Heitor document is one important step in this discussion, but we know that there is a lot in front of us. APRE will do our part, but we are just one of the actors together with others. So please, we rely, and I'm referring now to our members, on you to reinforce the voices of the Italian, of the other member states, of the researcher in the future discussion for the, let me hope and say that, for the next framework program. Thank you again, Manuel, and thanks to all participants who have been with us so long.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.